I'm sure many of us know Blizzard Entertainment for their well-known franchises such as Warcraft, Starcraft, and Diablo. But like many game developers at the time and even nowadays, there is always a game in the works that was cancelled for a variety of reasons. Now, the interesting part is that some of these cancelled games either had a lot of information or had little to no information behind them. In the case of Blizzard Entertainment, there is one particular project that has piqued my interest the most. Going back to the year 1995, they released a preview demo, which is meant to showcase their upcoming works. And from what I've recalled, there have been several projects being worked on during that time. One of them being a sequel to the popular Warcraft Orcs and Humans, and that would be Warcraft 2 Tides of Darkness, which is one of my all-time favorite real-time strategy games, and also a really significant improvement over its predecessor. Now, we all know Warcraft 2 was obviously released, but Blizzard had previously collaborated with Channeling Software, and both developers were working on a sequel to Pax Imperia, a space empire strategy game. Now, I am not too familiar with the original game nor the sequel, but it does look interesting to be honest. Maybe one day I'll give it a try. Pax Imperia 2, despite getting a push back to early 1996 for the release date, Blizzard Entertainment gave up the rights to THQ in August 1996, and the game was eventually renamed to Pax Imperia, Eminent Domain. The game ended up getting released in November 1997. Another Blizzard project that was in the works around that time was Diablo, a role-playing game that released in 1997, the same year that Pax Imperia Eminent Domain was released. Except that Diablo came out first that year. Now, there have been some debates. A debate about Diablo's release date. It was originally assumed to be released at the near end of 1996, on the last day of 1996 to be exact. But I guess that wasn't the case. Here in the United States, Diablo came out and hit shelves in January 3rd, 1997, while the final build was compiled in likely December 27th, 1996. Regardless of that, Warcraft 2 and Diablo were the second of the four to survive, according to the first Blizzard preview demo from September 1995. While only one survived, albeit without Blizzard. However, the fourth game appeared to be a bit of a mystery, and not many people have talked about it. Now, the fourth project from Blizzard Entertainment's previews from September 1995 that we're talking about is called Shattered Nations. The weird thing about Shattered Nations, at least to me, is that despite Blizzard's reputation for making role-playing and real-time strategy games, Shattered Nations was originally meant to be a turn-based strategy game, which is something that really sounds interesting to me. Blizzard had originally made games for consoles like, for example, Blackthorn, which I kinda see it being inspired by Prince of Persia, and would go on to make a real-time strategy game like Warcraft Orcs and Humans. The same game that gave Westwood Studios some competition, and while they're making a sequel, they're over there making a turn-based strategy game. I don't know, it's kinda interesting to me to be honest. Anyways, this game was set in a post-apocalyptic world. According to the game's preview trailer, and I quote, "There was a time when the world had become a place of peace. Then, in the flash of an instant, time stood still. Pain, devastation, death. These were the products of our ignorance. A winter that lasted over 2 decades has left this world barren and desolate. Mankind has been reduced to scavenging the remains of a once proud past in order to survive." Now, according to an interview from Interactive Entertainment magazine dated in June 1995, Shattered Nations was said to be a mixture of a low-technology world that you would see from Road Warrior and a futuristic post-Holocaust science fiction world that you would see from Terminator 2. There's another piece of information that I've discovered through magazine articles, including one that actually shows Blizzard's old website from 1995 or early 1996. It also appears that Shattered Nations was marketed as being heavily focused on multiplayer gameplay. which is not too surprising considering back in the 1990s, online multiplayer gaming was all the rage. It was also said that Shattered Nations was designed to be more than just a conquer the world type of game, but rather one in which you just start from scratch and work your way up. I guess it pretty much makes sense given the setting, which takes place in a post-Holocaust world. When your world is threatened with extinction, you have to move somewhere, right? And with the focus on multiplayer, Shattered Nations kind of strikes me as an intriguing what if. Because the concept of a multiplayer game where you battle each other while striving to reconstruct society sounds like something I would like. There's even a real-time strategy game that takes place in a similar setting, but that game is probably for another video. But in the case of Shattered Nations, apparently this game was compared to other games like Outpost and Ascendancy. Both of these games I've never heard about, or just barely. But as a fan of the old Blizzard Entertainment, especially since childhood, I would have believed that Shattered Nations would have had really good potential, at least as a multiplayer game. But however, mere months after its announcement, the game was effectively scrapped. While development of this game was pretty much no more, its spirit sort of lives on. Because while Shattered Nations along with other projects was being developed, there was apparently another project in the works. And that would be another real-time strategy game that would take place in a science fiction setting. That game would then become Starcraft. Basically, Starcraft was being developed under Warcraft 2's game engine. And that game, alongside Diablo, made its premiere at the E3 Expo back in May 1996. While I could imagine Diablo was getting more praise, I wouldn't say the same thing for Starcraft. It became apparent that the game was very much lambasted for being Warcraft 2, but purple, along with people calling out the game as Orcs in Space. And to add insult to injury, Starcraft paled in comparison to another upcoming real-time strategy game that was on display, and that game would be Dominion. This eventually led Blizzard to rewrite the entire game engine, while giving it a new makeover in the process. And one way to get started with that process would be to recycle assets from cancelled projects like Shattered Nations. Remember the Goliath that the Terrans use? That originated from Shattered Nations. And the various screenshots that released after E3 pretty much proves it. And even some units like the Siege Tank seems to have a similar aesthetic from Shattered Nations. But then again, this is my theory. But anyway, I guess I'll reserve the discussion of StarCraft's development history for another video. But it makes me wonder what would have happened if Shattered Nations had truly been released. But instead of a post-Holocaust turn-based strategy game, we got one of the most popular and influential real-time strategy games of all time. But then again, what are your opinions on Shattered Nations? Do you think it would have been a decent game if it had been released, or would it become more popular, or would it just slip into obscurity? I would want to hear your ideas and opinions in the comment section down below. Anyway, that's about it for this video. Thank you all for watching and peace out everybody. See ya.